You said ready, so.
I did. We are live.
Welcome, everyone, to the special meeting of the board. I will ask the secretary to please call the roll.
Good morning. Chair Gway. Absence is noted. He is expected momentarily. Regent Balducci. He is expected to call in as well. Regent Bloom. Regent
You're
Bloom,
on
you're
mute.
muted.
Here, present.
Student Regent Earlington.
Present.
Vice Chair James.
Present.
Regent Japanen.
Present.
Regent Porth.
Present.
Student Regent Sanchez.
Present.
Regent Santiago.
Here.
Regent Stewart.
Here.
Regent Wright.
Here.
Regent Yang.
Here.
Our ex officios, Professor Cunningham.
Here.
Professor Sasanker.
Here.
Commissioner Bartolomeo.
Here.
Commissioner Jutani.
Present.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Here.
Commissioner Russell Tucker. Absence is noted. Chief Workforce Officer Valeries. Absence is noted, but she is expected. Undersecretary ex officio Casamento.
Here.
And our presidents, President Maduco,
Here.
Interim President Smith,
Present.
President Toro,
Here.
President Singh,
Here.
President Klonowski,
Here.
President Ismaili,
Here.
and I believe Chair Gway joined us on the phone. We have one call-in user. Could that person identify themselves, please?
Oh, that's me, Dante Bartolomeo, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair James, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We have one bit of housekeeping, if you will, before we get started. Seth Freeman, president of the 4Cs, would like to exercise his contractual privilege to speak at this special board meeting. So we need to amend the agenda to add public comment from Seth Freeman. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second Rick Porth.
Is the motion, I'll call the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The motion to add his public comment is approved. And now I'd like to call for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries and the agenda is adopted. So now I will ask the Secretary of the Board, Pam Helene, to manage the public comment portion of our meeting.
Thank you, Vice Chair James. Hold, please, and I'll bring Seth Freeman in from the lobby. Hold on, please. Seth, could you check your audio for me?
Can you hear me, Pam?
We can, thank you. Do you have your 3 minutes?
I do.
You may begin.
Thank you. Board of Regents members, I'm speaking to you today to once again highlight the failures of Chancellor Chang and President Maduco to serve our students. I'm also speaking to call out the board for rubber stamping yet another insufficient CSCU funding request and for continuing to serve as a blunt instrument for Governor Lamont and his racialized austerity agenda. Part one, I'm calling students, not stakes. Our union asserts that Chancellor Chang remains a complete embarrassment and failure. The recent expose highlighting the Chancellor's wasteful behavior is sad, particularly when you contrast the Chancellor's steak dinners with community college students with no cafeteria services. But the unfortunate truth is that Governor Ned Lamont is fine with the Chancellor eating out at restaurants as long as the Chancellor does the governor's dirty work. As long as the Chancellor sells out our working class and immigrant students, Governor Lamont will give the Chancellor all the steak dinners he wants to keep his tummy nice and fat. Part 2, we're calling President Maduko Sells Out Our Students. Today, President Maduko presents his crowning achievement, his much anticipated plan to restore student-facing services. After CT State made $24 million worth of cuts last year, President Maduko is now recommending a meager and pathetic $1.7 million of restoration. Let's just repeat that. After CT State made $24 million worth of cuts last year, President Maduko is now recommending a meager and pathetic $1.7 million of restoration. President Maduko is flatly lying about the needs across CT State. President Maduko is literally self-inflicting harm on our students by his decision to use the most narrow and limited approach possible in restoring student services. Well, this is what it looks like in real time to sell out Black and brown students and to sell out your faculty and staff. President Maduko has no problem taking the scraps from this board and from the governor if that's what it takes to get the coveted pat on the head. Finally, part 3, taking the scraps from the governor. Last month, this board rubber-stamped Chancellor Chang and CFO Blanchard's pathetic and insulting budget submission to OPM. This budget submission will leave CSU underfunded in the next biennium without the resources our students need. This was painful and frustrating for faculty, staff, and students to see. Well, I will remind this board who is not going to sell out our students for steak dinners. I will remind this board who is not going to lie about what our students need. Remind this board who is not afraid to stand up to Ned Lamont and fight for our students. Remind this board who is not going to shuck and jive and dance for the governor. Yes, you know the answer. Our unions are not doing any of this. We are gearing up for a big fight this spring on behalf of our students. We are fighting to clear the fiscal roadblocks that are starving public services across the state. We are fighting to expand investments in public services to support low-income and working-class families who are struggling. Unlike the governor and this board, we are not fighting to preserve the wealth and privilege of the millionaires, billionaires, and the ultra-wealthy. So this is a fight in the spring. We'll be ready. We just wish this board would get on the right side of the fight for a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Freeman. Chair James, that is our only public comment, and we can continue with the rest of the agenda.
Okay, just one moment. We actually have a very brief agenda today, which is a resolution approving the plan to reinstate student services at CT State Community College and updates from the Special Task Forces on Healthcare and Online Education. But before we proceed, I would like to give Chancellor Chang a few minutes for his remarks.
Thank you, Vice Chair James. Appreciate the time as always. So the first thing I will talk about is we have a meeting coming up in early December. I believe it's December 5th, where it's a special meeting. The board is going to have a presentation from NCHEMS. This is the group, the consulting group that was commissioned by the Office of Policy and Management to conduct a financial analysis of the system. At that time, the presentation of their work will be made to the board. This will be a public meeting, and I really encourage all of our stakeholders to be there so that we can hear the discussion together and again, voice our opinions on some of the suggestions that are made. It's important work that we need to continue to try to wrap our heads around and try to get behind to make our system better. So with that said, I just want to say thanks again to the board and to all of our faculty, staff, students, and administrators who are here. You know that President Maduko and his team will present their plan to restore student services at CT State Community College. A portion of which was reduced as part of the deficit mitigation efforts in FY24. So the presentation represents a really thoughtful and collaborative effort to address the needs of our students. I want to really say how appreciative I am, how CT State leadership has prioritized shared governance throughout the process. They've engaged stakeholders across the institution to identify the services that are most essential to student support and student success. This inclusive approach ensures that the voices of students, faculty, and staff are central to the development of this plan. The restoration of these services is not just a matter of operational necessity. It also demonstrates the board's deep commitment to our students and the quality of their higher education experience. If you recall, this activity began with the board's urging and ultimately a resolution. So thank you to the board for continuing to push forward for the best interests of students. Supporting students in achieving their goals is at the heart of our mission, and this initiative shows how critical the investments can directly enhance the outcomes and experience. So we look forward to hearing today's presentation and discussing how the plan will address the needs, reaffirm our priorities, and reinforce the values we place on their educational journeys. Before we get into that, I do want to share a few updates. We've been very busy in the realm of ensuring leadership stability across the system. Just last week, the Western Connecticut State University search for their next full-time permanent president was officially advertised. And I want to thank President Zulma Toro of Central Connecticut State University for her work as the search committee chair. And I want to thank the members of the search committee who represent AUP at Western Connecticut State University. They represent SWOF, they represent the Senate, the faculty, staff. Currently, the participation on the search advisory committee is being representative and requested from various constituent groups, and it's very inclusive and it's very engaged. Also, in response to calls for greater transparency and campus involvement in the presidential search process and learning from past searches that we have conducted, we've made some significant changes. So the process now includes campus visits and open public forums for candidates advancing to the final round. So these changes reflect the need to balance confidentiality with our commitment to fostering an open and inclusive process, which has already been positively received by stakeholders. So the changes that were ultimately made were firmly endorsed by the search committee. Building on this, I intend to apply the same level of openness and engagement to our next presidential search, and that is the search for the next president at Southern Connecticut State University. Dr. Dwayne Smith has done an incredible job as the interim so far, and the search will begin shortly with an announcement planned for this upcoming week. So thank you to Dr. Smith for continuing to do your work, and I know that this is going to be a very positive and good process for the entire institution. Leadership transitions, they're really important for our success as a system and for our institutions. And so I'm confident that we're going to continue to have inclusive processes that secure strong and visionary leaders. On November 29th, in that vein, we're welcoming two exceptional individuals to CSCU's executive team. First is Karen Buffkin. She will serve as the general counsel for the CSCU system. And second is Cameron Liston, and he will be the system's chief compliance officer. Karen Buffkin has a wealth of legal experience and expertise, and she's served both in the public sector in Connecticut and in higher education, which will be really, really important and valuable as we navigate this truly complex landscape. It's filled with policy and governance. In a similar vein, Cameron Liston's extensive background in compliance and oversight is instrumental in strengthening our commitment to accountability and integrity. So these two leaders join us at a critical time, and their combined knowledge and experience will help ensure that policy and compliance remain top priorities across the system. Both Cameron and Karen will work closely with our Board of Regents on key initiatives, and they will ensure alignment with our broader goals and strategic priorities. A couple more team announcements. We are also welcoming, actually on November 29th, Michael Mundrain. Michael Mundrain will be serving as the interim chief information officer for the system office. That role has been empty now for a few months. Mike Mundrain has a wealth of experience as well as a CIO. He has led that work for the state's flagship for 10 years, and we're really fortunate to be able to secure his services for the foreseeable future. Michael is going to really help with so many different things and really focus on CT State shared services and the system broadly to make sure that our campuses, our institutions, and the system are all receiving the attention and the coordination that they need and they deserve. So I'm confident that all of this leadership is going to be pivotal in driving continued success and helping us turn around very specific areas that require ever more attention. So I hope you'll help me join me in welcoming them. I do have to say thank you, of course, to Vita Litvin. She has served for over a year as the interim general counsel. She has been absolutely wonderful and tireless in her work as the interim general counsel. She's helped to continue to strengthen that general counsel's office team. So Vita, thank you for all the hard work that you've done there. The last personnel announcement is another very positive one. I'm happy to tell you that Marilyn Albrecht is going to be our permanent director of labor relations. Marilyn has been serving in this role as an interim, and her leadership expertise and commitment during this time have really been invaluable. So all of these appointments reflect the confidence in all of our folks, their ability to navigate the complexities of the work and the landscape that lie ahead. And we're really, really happy and positive that they're going to be here for the long term and help us do an incredible amount of work. So a few more comments. I'd like to provide an update on the progress of the Board of Regents ACT framework and its directive to establish system-wide goals and key performance indicators. The system-wide goals were identified by our CSCU President's Council, each of our 6 presidents. Each campus is now actively working to select KPIs that align with these priorities. This process is being conducted collaboratively through the shared governance process to ensure that diverse perspectives are represented. This inclusive approach not only strengthens the alignment of KPIs with institutional priorities, but also fosters a sense of shared ownership and commitment across the system. Each campus is engaging in thoughtful discussions and collaborative decision-making to identify those KPIs that are meaningful and reflective of their unique institutional priorities. So as we continue this work, I want to thank everyone involved for their dedication. Your efforts are building the foundation to a unified and impactful system-wide approach that will achieve shared goals. So that concludes my remarks, Vice Chair. James, thank you for the time.
Thank you. I believe Chair Gui is now connected with us. And if so, I would like to turn the meeting back over to him. I'm not sure if he was able to hear the first part of the meeting, but I would like to, before I turn the meeting back over to Chair Gui, just remind all of us that our policy actually states that presenters should avoid personal affronts, and it would be appropriate decorum for us to abide by that policy. Chair Gui?
Thank you. I apologize for joining late. I joined 11 minutes after the hour, so I did miss opening comments. I'm at Google's Pier 57 complex in New York City, and I can assure you that trying to get on a Cisco bridge from Google is not easy. And it took me about 20 minutes to figure it out. But I'm here. We can have a discussion about big tech another time. Thank you, Chancellor. I did not have prepared comments. I really wanted to let the work products today speak for themselves, which was around the reinstatement of student services and also updates on our task forces. In late August, the board directed the Chancellor and the President of CT State Community College to present the board's Finance and Infrastructure Committee, along with the board's Academic and Student Affairs Committee, a plan to strategically restore and or adjust certain student services across Connecticut State affected in the fiscal 24-25 deficit mitigation efforts. Earlier this month, this CT State's plan was approved unanimously in those 2 committees and is now being put forth for full consideration to this board. President Maduco and CT State's Kerry Kelly are here today to review that plan and answer questions. So I'm going to turn it over to President Maduco and allow you to do a brief PowerPoint and field questions on this on this initiative.
Good morning, Chair Gui, Vice Chair James, Regents, Chancellor Chang, fellow institutional presidents, and esteemed guests and colleagues, John Maduco, CT State President. Today I'm joined by our Vice President of Finance and Administration, Ms. Carrie Kelly. And before you, we have a slide deck to provide an overview of our plan to restore student services that were impacted by CT State's deficit mitigation plan. This slide here just kind of gives you a visual on the complex footprint of CT State. As you know, we have 12 main campuses. We have our central office in New Britain, and then we have a litany of satellite locations across the great state of Connecticut. So we were intentional with our approach to ensure that we're doing our best to address the multifaceted needs of our students across our massive footprint. Gary, next slide. So the resolution to restore student-facing services prioritized key student services such as library hours, tutoring services, disability services, academic advising and counseling, mental health and wellness, wraparound services that include food pantry, transportation, childcare, and emergency student funding. Next slide, Carrie. Now, our plan also aligns with CT State's strategic priorities and goals. Many of those priorities are tied to teaching and learning, student wraparound services, public safety, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are really thoughtful in terms of doing our best to capture the student voice. Over the past couple of academic years, we have leveraged a holistic student support survey that assesses the needs of our students and their challenges. This is something that is issued during our long semesters of fall and spring. It's been a really powerful instrument to really kind of determine just who our students are, right? So, and the survey is asking our students in terms of the mode of transportation, how they get to campus, whether or not they are employed, whether or not they are a caregiver, whether or not they have any needs as it relates to insecurities like mental health, student services, just to get an idea of just who they are. Additionally, I really want to make the point that no two academic years are the same, right? So each year we are introduced to a litany of different students that are bringing different opportunities and challenges to the table. Additionally, we are huge proponents of our shared and participatory governance infrastructure, at CT State. And we worked closely with our college senate to ensure that there is transparency and visibility of our work and our ultimate plan to them. Additionally, we have a timeline of implementation. We've identified proposed funding sources, and this entire process has been transparent. Next slide. So the progress of developing this plan, I charged our campus leaders in partnership with Carrie Kelly to ensure our campus leaders are working with our local stakeholders, right, to really identify student needs. Additionally, initial recommendations from our campuses were submitted on the 27th of September to allow our finance division to begin to analyze and cost each of those recommendations. Additionally, we were feeling just the pressure of just time constraints. So I really want to give kudos to the CT State College Senate President, Professor L. Vandermark of our Asnuntuck campus, who issued a joint letter with me to Chair Gui and Chancellor Chang, asking for an extension of time, and we're very appreciative for the approval of the extension of time. Additionally, we issued a survey of our operations, of the hours of operations of our student-facing services across our campuses and our satellite locations to give us a broader and better picture of when these services are being offered to our students. I think that's really important for everyone that's called to understand. We have students, 50% of our students are taking their classes on our campuses between the hours of 7 a.m. and noon. Another 25% of our students are taking their classes between noon and about 6 p.m. And then the last 25% of our students are taking their classes after 6 p.m., right? So there's a diversity on when our students are on our campuses and when they're accessing the respective student services across our locations. And then lastly, with the support of College Senate leaders, we engaged, with them through shared governance, through their local committees, to really ensure, that we're doing our best to bring, the initial recommendations to their attention, but also field their questions and ensure that we provide a platform to hear their concerns. Next slide. So this entire process is transparent. We have adopted and launched a transparency website that kind of details every facet of this process. That's the QR code. It has documentation of all the engagement across our campuses. It has updates on the process to develop the plan. It has copies of the holistic student services survey, links to our College Senate meetings, the hours of operations of our student services across the campus satellite locations, and copies of the recommendations from each of our campuses, right? So again, nothing to hide. We want to make sure that there is visibility to every facet of this process. Next slide. So the plan, and Carrie, I definitely don't want to do all the talking. I want you to chime in because you did tremendous work. So, but we received 76 requests from across our campuses. And Carrie and her finance division began to cost out those plans, but also to kind of categorize these plans in terms of were they aligned with the spirit of the resolution. So Carrie, can you chime in and just kind of put some context to the process that you and your team adopted to kind of just assess the requests we received from the campuses?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. So the finance team received 76 requests, 3 from President Maduco and the remaining 73 from across the campuses. And we analyzed them to determine if they were directly related to deficit mitigation. Many were, but not all. Some of them were items that are high priorities for the campus, but were not directly related to deficit mitigation in FY24 or 25, as well as the 7 enumerated areas in the board resolution. So there were things that were afield from that. So we analyzed everything and categorized it. Of the 76 requests, 39 were recommended to move forward for funding as they met both criteria. 1, they were directly related to deficit mitigation in 24 or 25 and were in the areas of the 7 enumerated purposes in the resolution. There were 9 that were not recommended because they were not directly related to deficit mitigation. And then there were 19 that were not defined as student services in the resolution. And then there was a small handful of things, 9 of them, where conditions on the ground had changed. For example, at Capital, they were successful in obtaining grant funding, so they no longer needed funding through this mechanism. So a number of them were either funded already in the budget and there was a miscommunication, or there was grant funding that we're able to bring to bear.
Next slide, Carrie. Now, in terms of additional initiatives that I felt were important to include in this plan, were across 3 areas: student transportation, supplemental instruction, and career services. So from a transportation standpoint, we have been fortunate to engage with our stakeholders across the campuses via town halls. I believe to date we have conducted 9 town halls that have included, stakeholders across faculty, staff, and students for them to share with me and my executive team their concerns, right? And a common theme that was brought to my attention was student transportation. So we are appreciative and we are fortunate to have the UPass program that provides public transportation to all credit-based students across CT State. But there are challenges with the UPass program. Some of our campuses are not afforded available or consistent access to public transportation. Those campuses being our Middlesex campus in Middletown, our Northwestern campus in Winstead, our Naugatuck Valley campus in Waterbury, where there's just inconsistencies with the public transportation, and then our Quinebaug Valley campuses, primarily in Danielson. All right, so that's just been an issue. So in terms of student transportation, we're working closely with Uber to provide a subsidized ride sharing option for our students across CT State that'll give students access in situations where public transportation isn't available for those aforementioned campus I mentioned, but really for all of our campuses. You know, here in Connecticut, at some point the bus line stops, and you do have students that are on our campuses, at 10 p.m., right? So how is it that they're getting back home? So we felt like there's an opportunity for us to pilot this partnership with Uber to see if it helps supplement and buffer the inconsistencies and some of the shortcomings that our students face when it comes to public transportation. Next is a supplemental instruction pilot program per our provost office, where we would embed peer tutors to provide student success support in 25 sections of courses with high withdrawal or failure rates. This would fund at least one section per campus, and this aligns with some of the national best practices when you're providing supplemental or embedded instruction towards increasing student success. And then lastly, career services. Though some of our campuses submitted requests for career services, we quickly recognized that it would result in an inequity when it comes to student support services, right? So, my additions to this recommendation is to ensure that we have career services across our 12 main campuses, and the campuses of Nantucket, Northwestern, Three Rivers, and Tungus. The plan is to ensure that they have that as well. Carrie, next slide. Carrie, you can take the slide.
Great. So this is an analysis here on the right of how the recommendations to restore student-facing services break down by functional area. And as you can see, there's some areas that are not represented here. And that's really because we were very deliberate in our work in the deficit mitigation process to try to shield as much as possible to minimize the impact for students. We weren't able to have a zero impact plan moving forward, but we worked very hard. So there's things like mental health services that you don't see here because we didn't have any deficit mitigation strategies that were reducing services in those areas. So this is the way the plan that we're putting forward today breaks down across functional areas.
Thank you, Carrie. Next slide. So ultimately, the implementation timeline and budget, right? So we assume a December 1st implementation. So behind the scenes, we've been proactively kind of just preparing in hopes of an approval and support from the full Board of Regents. Secondly, we want to acknowledge that at the end of fiscal 424, it resulted in a $4.8 million surplus due to things that Carrie Kelly and ex officio Regent Casamento are experts at, but we have a surplus of $4.8 million, and our request per the authority of the Board of Regents is to increase our FY25 expenditures by $1.7 million for FY24, thereby reducing the surplus of $3 million, but funding this student services restoration plan. Our FY24 deficit mitigation plan that was implemented had a net reduction of about $24 million in expenditures. And this plan restores approximately 10% of reductions when fully annualized. So I want to make it clear, we are not saying this is a perfect plan, right? But we have to be mindful and realistic in terms of the sustainability of funding. What is put forth in this plan is temporary, right? Because we want to address the immediate needs for this academic year, right? And then ultimately revisit, what can be done in the subsequent years. But we recognize that we have to be responsible when it comes to the sustainability or continuous expenditures, especially when it comes to, permanent resources like personnel. Additionally, our college senate was supported. So they approved a conditional support of this plan, but they were vocal in terms of their displeasure in terms of the plan's limitations. And I have vowed, my office and my team, we have vowed to our college senate and really to our college community that come to mid-year of our academic year that we would revisit those items, those requests, that came from our campuses that are not included in CT State's plan to restore student services. And that process will remove any limitation or confinements per this resolution of the board, so that have it be its faculty, have it be its administrative, have it be its maintenance or facilities. We want to ensure that we are providing a process that our campuses are bringing forward their priorities. And then based on assumed revenue gains from a very positive fall semester, we want to see what of those requests we can fund, right? So this will be a continuous process, continue to reevaluate where we are financially, but we have to be realistic and recognize that when it comes to just resources, we have to differentiate whether those things are temporary versus things that are continuous. Gary, next slide. And at this time, we're happy to answer any questions, but I really want to commend our college community for their patience with me, but also their candor, right? At CT State, our employees, as you know, do not mince words, and I welcome that. I welcome their freedom of speech, have it be if it's positive or critical of myself or our administration, but we feel that we put forth the best plan possible with the realities of our finances and the expectations of everyone involved.
President Maduka, I want to thank you and CFO Kelly and the entire team and everyone who participated. Obviously, this is not an easy endeavor, but it's an important endeavor because we prioritize the needs of successful academic and student outcomes. And that's what I think we saw. We're not going to solve for perfection, but we're going to solve for collaboration. I know that Professor Cunningham had his hand raised, and I want to acknowledge his input in this process.
Thank you, Chair Gway. My comments have to do with the ACT, which was raised earlier by Chancellor Chang. I would like to hold off on my comments so that I don't derail the discussion of CT State, and I'd ask the accommodation to offer my comments after this agenda item is over.
You'll absolutely have that privilege.
Chair Gway, Professor Vandermark has her hand raised.
Professor Vandermark, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent James. I am here today representing CT State Senate, and specifically, I want to talk about the provisional support that we provided for the CT State's plan and expand a little bit on why there was provisional support. And it really comes down to the narrowness of the student services resolution and the rigor that was applied for the positions being considered. More specifically, senators expressed that there were more important student-facing positions that did not fall within the rubric of the student services resolution, and that those positions should have been considered. There were also concerns about the sustainability of these positions and the potential harm for students if these provisional positions weren't sustained. And then finally, there were concerns about the shared governance process employed at each of the campuses. All of these concerns were overcome when President Maduka committed to implementing the mid-year review process that he's already described. However, in light of Governor Lamont's recent order for additional cuts, some senators have already expressed concern that those positions will not be given the same consideration that they would have just 6 weeks ago. So I think it's also important to understand that Senate at the same meeting received a briefing on the budget process and our outlook. So we were really in tune to where CT State was at the moment with that provisional support and Governor Lamont's recent order is deeply troubling. So I am asking each of our regents to leverage your proximity to the governor and advocate for CT State and urge him to honor his previous commitment to exclude higher education from any further cuts. We need your help to do that so that some of the most critical positions can and will be addressed at the mid-year budget review. Thank you for your time.
And Chair Gway, Professor Susanker's hand is raised as well.
Professor Susanker, you have the floor.
Thanks. So I just, I know that I expressed these concerns at both the ASA and finance meetings, but just for the larger group, I want to reiterate just a source of disappointment with this. You know, I've mentioned before that the way it was put together, the thoughtfulness of some of the additional, you know, transportation needs, etc. All of those things are appreciated. But my concern is just mostly with like the scope of the restoration. We're talking about 1.7 million in fiscal year 25 that I guess annualizes to about 10% of the cut that we're responding to. So the initial cut was $24 million. We're restoring 1.7 million this year with the hope of holding on to these positions that would be about 2.1 in the coming years. But we're doing this in a context of a off-budget legislation, a non-budget legislative session in which the legislature provided the system with a good $33 million more than it was asking for. And I think specifically in response to advocacy of faculty, staff, etc., who were really concerned about restoring these cuts. So the difference between what we were afforded by the legislature and what we're actually using in fiscal year 25, which is why it was done in a non-budget year, is rather large. And I get that there is another context, which is the governor's position on which direction we should be going, and that in fact it should be cuts. But look, there's a big difference here between what was cut and what has been restored. And there is a pot of money that seemed to have come to us for this purpose. And when we look towards the coming years, it seems as if our budget request from the state also anticipates even further cuts. So we are not really restoring these services. So it's just, I want on the record just to really make clear that this is still a cut. It's a deep cut, and it's more cuts going forward, which is, I think, inconsistent with what I thought the spirit of the resolution was, and also with what the intention of the money we got this year was. And to that end, I'm also hoping, and this is a sort of separate request, but in this context, it would be good to see how that additional money was spent, and if any of it made its way to CT State, which was facing the biggest crisis at the time that we requested it. Because I know that we're saying now that CT State has surplus, but only surplus in the face of a reduced scope, right? Cuts, right? We've made it smaller, and now there's an excess, but that is actually a measure of our cuts, or the surplus is a measure of our cuts, right? So I think it's very important to the state. Community college has a very particular mission. There is no other open enrollment institution in the state, and we are making it smaller and smaller and smaller. There was money afforded to us, or to the system, with the intention of at least maintaining some of these services. Would like to see where that money went at some point.
Duly noted, Professor Susanker, and CFO Blanchard is available to follow up after the meeting on that. If you want me to attend a meeting with you to go through those puts and takes, I'll be available to do that with you if you want. Vice Chair James.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Senator L. Van Dummerk's report that it is incredibly important for the Board of Regents and all of us in this community to advocate in the best interest of our students and in the interest of CSCU. So that point is well taken, and I think there will be many more discussions about how we can collectively do that more effectively.
Thank you. Regent Santiago.
Thank you, Chair Guay. I just wanted to say, appreciate all of the work that President Maduco and his team have put into this. It's not an easy situation. Just also, throw my support on the idea that we want to be collaborative with all stakeholders, which I think starts with appropriate decorum in these meetings and no personal attacks on folks. So hopefully that's something we can live up to in future meetings, and bring all stakeholders into a constructive conversation on how to address the challenges in front of us, where we all believe in the necessity, the power, and the value of the educational role of the institutions that we serve. We need to face the reality of what we have in front of us, mandated salary increases from the state that are unsupported, that we need to budget for, decreasing enrollment, and other challenges to a very important institution. And I look forward to a positive, collaborative, and appropriate communication in the ways to solve those problems together.
Thank you, Regent Santiago. I did not see the opening of this meeting. I joined 11 minutes late, but from what I'm gleaning out of these comments is that it was maybe not on mark. So I'm going to ask our board secretary going forward in the future to send out our BOR policy 6.3, which is around public participation, and send it to everyone who's invited to the meeting so they understand the standards and decorum. When I started this board chair position, one of the first things I said is we need to have the right level of respect and decorum, which I think is really foundational. And if we're modeling to our students this type of behavior, we got bigger issues that we need to solve for. So I'm expecting people to act professionally. And as board chair, if there are public comments that are not, I will stop them in the meeting and revert to written comments, because we need to do a better job for ourselves and our students. Regent Porth.
Thank you. I'll be quick about this because I'm reiterating a couple things that were said earlier by other regents, but I want to say thank you. I said this in our Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting too. I want to thank John Maduco and everyone who worked through that rigorous, comprehensive process to engage people in this discussion about how to put this plan together to restore student services. I think it represents a good example of how we can operate going forward in the most inclusive and transparent way. And so I want to say thank you for that. I agree with Regent James. I do believe it's incumbent on us as regents to advocate at every turn for the resources we need to ensure student success. I also think that processes like this one we're discussing this morning will help us when we make our case with funders, especially in the state government, who understand that we've done our due diligence and we're serious about this whole process of investing where student success can best be served. And I think that President Maduco, in talking about the mid-year review, offered a really important way for us to stay with this over time. I regard this process that we were discussing this morning as an opening, and I hope that it becomes a way of doing business, not only in this kind of issue, but on other issues as well. And I hope that that's an indication to all our partners in the CSCU community that we're serious about this and we want to try to do this right. So thanks for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you. Any other comments?
CFO Blanchard has his hand
Okay.
raised.
CFO Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard a comment made earlier by Professor Sasanker that suggested that we had $33 million extra. I was a little confused by that comment. That is not true. I wondered if I could get a clarification from Professor Sasanker.
Absolutely. Last session, the CSU administration asked for, I believe it was $47 million.
That's correct.
Received 80. Anticipated another 20 at the end of this year. It looks like we're only going to get another 10 and a half, maybe. But the difference between the amount that the administration asked for and what it received is 33 million. Now I know that we don't, is it not?
I'm not sure if that's the proper math for this purpose.
Well, the difference between 47 million and 80 is 33. So that's what I'm referring to. The difference between what was asked for and what was received.
Okay, well, I'll have to call upon, I'll rely upon CFO Kelly to specify the spending of those funds, but rest assured, we did not receive more funds than we asked for. Certainly don't have extra funds. To the extent that we have unexpended appropriations, we certainly intend to expend them during the biennium.
Okay, well, I will just say that the board documents and public documents show that CSCU said we need 47 point something or 46 point something million to avoid layoffs, and that's all we're asking for. And we did a lot of work, those of us who are, faculty and staff, to ask for a little bit more in the hopes that we would be able to deal with the enormous deficit that was reported at CT State and the struggles at Western. There was never in the public record any ask from the CSU administration for more than that amount. So that is the difference that I'm talking about. That's it.
Professor Sasanker, why don't I follow up with you after the meeting to try to clarify this with you?
Yeah, I'd like to turn it over to Adam Joseph, who has his hand up.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Guay. Our initial ask back prior to the session was $47.6 million. During the legislative session, right, that was to get our budget to balance. There was wage reopener that was negotiated that netted out to about $33 million. Of that, $14 million was provided by the state for the block grant, leaving about a little bit less than $19 million left over on that was being referred to as the excess funds, which we did request. We requested that from the legislators. We requested that during budget negotiations. The legislature and governor expanded the parameters of the PAC program, estimated to cost under about $6 million. So, if I hope that, that brings a little bit additional clarity to where things are. Our initial ask was $47 million during the early spring. Right, wage reopener was agreed to with our bargaining units. That raised our financial need and our financial ask from the General Assembly and Governor's office during those budget negotiations.
The wage reopener, sorry, I don't want to litigate this in public. I will say only this. When you speak of clarity, there should be some public record of an ask that exceeds 47.6 million. We have no such thing. I understand maybe that was backroom talk or whatever. I also understand that the difference amounts to the cost out of the wage reopener and that the pact was unfunded and that was almost $6 million. That still leaves us, let's say, with 10 million unaccounted for. And really, I guess there is a difference between, we can hash out numbers, there's a difference between what was understood as the intended purpose of some excess in this non-budget session and the actual effects. And I think need for a conversation about why we might not be able to spend that allocated money in ways that are satisfactory to any of us. And I actually think that it has to do with the broader context of the fact that this money is still one time, right? We continue to be afforded one-time funds that make it, we can only spend in certain ways. And that is a useful conversation to have so that we can better advocate with the state about the kinds of funding, the kinds of stable funding that we need to be afforded. And this is the reason that I'm having this conversation, not to call out anyone or to say that this is the kind of conversation that we need to have. So I hope that you don't feel attacked by my comments. All of our numbers align.
You're very professional, Professor Sasanker, and I think your points are very fair. I hope I didn't interrupt you. And I think the MCHEMS report calls this out very well, that the funding model in the state is because it's every year or two, it becomes very chaotic, right? There's not a predictable funding model. And many states have the same model as our states, and other states have a more predictable funding model. It's something that we, need to manage to, in my mind. Vice Chair James, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to say, it sounds like the complexity and the puts and takes of the budgeting process and the variable of all of the people involved and what happens before and after an interim. It would be advisable, I think, for Lloyd and Kelly and Professor Sasanker to really to lay out in a way that we all understand it, because it's much more convoluted than just a straightforward, here's your allocation, here's the deficit. It sounds like so many other things happen in between, and it would be helpful if we could lay it out in a way that we all understand what happened, when it happened, how it happened, because it sounds to me like this is more of we just need more clarity.
Yep.
But I don't think we can get that in this particular meeting. I would hope that more work will happen between now and our next meeting for us to understand this better.
Yeah, you have my commitment, Professor Sasanker, to get this really on a one-pager so we see the puts and takes. I think it's important for all of us to agree on the facts and the reality. I mean, this is really important, because in the absence of that, there's a lot of perceptions, and perceptions create feelings, and we're here to work together. So I think your point is well taken, and I'll follow up after this meeting on it. I don't see any more hands up. I know Professor Cunningham wants to talk about ACT, so we're going to do that after we vote on this resolution. So I'd like to call vote for it.
Second.
Second the motion. Thank you. Regent Wright. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? This motion, the plan to reinstate student services, is approved. I would like to move now to just two updates, and then we'll come to you, Professor Cunningham, if that's okay, and give you the time that you want. I'd like President Maduco to just give an update, a verbal update on the Special Healthcare Task Force.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair Quay. During the August special board meeting, I was charged with leading a CSU healthcare task force. So work has been underway. The strategic initiative is really focused on and targeted on really breakthroughs to really begin to align CSU's healthcare academic portfolio with Connecticut's evolving workforce needs, healthcare innovation, and policies and priorities. The primary goal is really to assess CSU's healthcare portfolio, identify the gaps, identify the opportunities, identify the successes, and really address critical workforce needs within Connecticut's healthcare sector, while also supporting student opportunities. This will ensure that CSU's programs are optimized to support the state's future healthcare workforce. The key objectives are as such: evaluate the current state of CSCU's healthcare programs, identify workforce and educational gaps, enhance program alignment with industry needs, foster healthcare innovation, promote equity and access, and strengthen partnerships to support long-term success. We believe that the impact will be by aligning our programs with industry demands and improving educational outcomes. It will demonstrate that CSCU is committed to advancing the future of healthcare across Connecticut and really providing more opportunities to student access, opportunities, and postgraduate success. The composition of our task force includes experts from healthcare, academia, workforce development, philanthropy, innovation policy, and national best practices. Our collaborators represent the Department of Public Health, the Connecticut Health Foundation, the Office of Workforce Strategy, Social Impact Partners, Connecticut Innovations, and CSCU academic leaders. Our progress to date is, one, we have convened the task force contributors. We've established a report outline and framework. We've collected and we continue to collect workforce development, equity, access policy data from our external contributors. And we've held discussions with our CSCU healthcare educators to gather this insight. I really want to give a shout out to our CSCU Healthcare Career Council that's been doing this work for years. And we're really leaning heavily on them to provide the outcomes of our healthcare programs across our 6 institutions. Now, lastly, the next steps are we are drafting the recommendations per the task force. We're going to synthesize the data that's been collected from discussions, reports, and system-wide input. We're developing actionable recommendations aligned with the identified gaps and opportunities. We will continue to engage stakeholders. That's really important. It's something that's non-negotiable. We want to make sure that our internal stakeholders, the litany of our phenomenal faculty and staff that are aligned with our healthcare programs across the 6 institutions, there's a mechanism by which we're gathering their direct feedback, and there's touch points for their engagement. And then lastly, we're going to finalize the report and have it ready for distribution and the presentation to the full Board of Regents. So we're really proud of our work up to date. We know there's high expectations from our board chair and others. And we know healthcare is one of the primary industries in the state of Connecticut as it relates to simply the sheer volume of the patients in this state, the shortages of clinicians and other healthcare professionals, and also the demands and stress that are being placed upon our healthcare systems and our employers, right? So we feel that putting forth a report highlights what we do well, but ultimately makes the case on how CSCU as a system can really contribute to the health of Connecticut and its residents. Thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, President Maduco. Please pass on my thanks to all those participating in your task force. We appreciate the work that they're doing. We look forward to the final work product. I think these are really meaningful careers and lives for our students to get into the healthcare industry, whether they're, doctors, nurses, assistants, technicians, in your programs, in the programs for all of CSCU will help facilitate those meaningful outcomes in people's lives. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to turn over to Regent Yang to give an update on his virtual online task force.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Quay. I actually have a few slides, so let me try to share those. 1 second here.
The virtual online person should be able to share those fairly easily. So
you would think.
There you go. You passed the test.
Okay, so thank you. So we were charged with evaluating the options for scaling Charter Oak. And so here's a couple of slides about where we're at. Now, this is not final. This is really just open for discussion because we do expect our results to come through next month. Just a quick slide about the members of this task force. I'm not going to read this. They're just so here people can look at this later. Really, what are we trying to address in the task force are 2 major problems. One is that Connecticut is a net exporter of online students. The charts on the left, and I apologize for the formats here, folks. We spent time working on the product, not too much on the dressing of that product, and want to get this to you as expeditiously as possible. The numbers on the left show that we are, as a state, sending our students to other places, Southern New Hampshire leading most, Western Governors, et cetera, et cetera. And also that a large number of the students that attend organizations online where they are in our state, CT State being number one. And you'll notice there's a bunch of other non-public institutions in between them. These are opportunities for us as Connecticut and as a Connecticut public system to do better by our students that are choosing the online modality, and to retain those jobs, those students, and those revenues for our state and for the benefit of our state. Second problem is, of course, workforce shortages. These are just a quick extract of some of the larger ones out there. Nothing here should be a surprise to anyone, but this is an ongoing thing that we are looking to address together with GWC and other major stakeholders in our state. Okay, come on, slide. Come on. Okay, whoop, skipping ahead. There we go. Okay, Charter Oak is in a unique position to address some of these problems. Obviously, it's fully online. It is statewide. It is in every place of our state. We can be, by the nature of the timeliness of the online modality, be responsive to workforce needs and employers. And as such, that is why there are workforce people and employers on our committee. And of course, affordability. This is just a quick slide. Again, I'm not going to read through this about where Charter Oak stands in pricing, but Charter Oak is competitively priced relative to our friends a little bit north of us. And we do so deliberately. They do so deliberately, and is actually cheaper than many other online options here in our state. So these are the goals that the task force has come up with. Again, these are draft goals. Everything here is draft because the final report is coming next month. But the major headline here is, given the need to address the problem of workforce and the need to address the problem of students that are leaving our state for online options, we can take that growth, we can channel that demand into growth for Charter Oak to grow from 2,000 to 6,000 students in 5 years. Doing so will allow us to achieve economies of scale that would allow us, if we so chose, to eliminate the amount of direct state support that we currently receive, and to do more services or cost reductions or serve our students better without those monies. People may ask, what are the drivers for that growth? Again, these are draft, but we're looking to expand our partnership through a program with CT State, obviously still in discussion, very cleverly called Ladders. The School of Education, which we are currently do and educate a lot of people for, together with the Secretary of Early Childhood Education and the program and the focus that the governor has placed on those programs in prior announcements. Charter Oak is the leading online educator of those personnels, which is great, and that we expect that to continue. It escapes not us, but I think nobody here, that our brand is not where it needs to be, certainly relative to some of these competitors who have vastly stronger brands and spend vastly more on marketing. That is a challenge and something that we need to address. And obviously, with upcoming enhancements to the online platform, specifically through AI, there are opportunities that we must capture if we're going to continue to serve our students and equip them for the modern workforce. But this is also an opportunity for us to grow because everybody in the online higher ed space must adapt and upgrade their platforms altogether, so we are not behind. Part of this initiative is not just growing the size of Charter Oak itself, in terms as a degree granting institution, it is also having Charter Oak be a center of excellence and to serve as an OPX provider to the rest of the CSCU system. This is something that I think has been spoken about by the Chancellor, by the Chair, and prior chairs in prior years, but it's certainly part of what we consider our mandate to put into our final report. It is, in my opinion, a given, and actually who cares about my opinion, in the opinion of Rick Levin, who knows infinitely more about this than I do, it is something that large systems and certainly schools of scale are working on developing themselves, because obviously not everyone will have what it takes to be able to build strong online programs. And again, Charter Oak, as a fully online institution, should lead that way and not be the only choice, but certainly be a good choice for anyone within our system to build something online. And this is something that we can do that allows us to take advantage of the cost structures of and experience of Charter Oak. If we can accomplish all this, obviously we hope to grow enrollment and therefore achieve economies of scale, which would then keep that money here in Connecticut, generate jobs in Connecticut, both in terms of Charter Oak jobs, system jobs, and in terms of the jobs that we're creating for our students. And then with the goal of providing any monies that we have and putting that into and allowing us to invest directly in our students. I don't know if there's any time for questions, Shergway, but if not, either way, our final report is slated for December 16th. You can feel free to reach out to me if you have any comments, concerns, questions, support, and you know, our task force exists certainly to serve the board and to serve you as the stakeholders. So please do reach out.
Thank you, Regent Yang. Could you give us the screen back? Professor Sasanker?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I was a little distracted at the beginning of your presentation, so you might have addressed this already, but just curious about whether just questions of state funding and funding in general for Charter Oak were addressed. I know that the state allocation for Charter Oak is something like $3 million, like it's tiny, and that the cost of running the thing is very tuition heavy. So even though tuition is very affordable, it's still the model of the system very much, you know, weighs on the students. And, you know, when we talk about equity within the system, one of the things that is part of that is that, you know, Charter Oak is an all adjunct staffed in terms of teaching faculty institution. And in addition, you know, they haven't had representation in the past, and in some cases, in some unique cases, there are instructors at Charter Oak who may be paid as little as 7% of what those of us at the other institutions would for an adjunct section. So that financial model is really going to have a lot to do with the rate at which we could expand and who can be served. And I just want to know if that will be, you know, further addressed, and it's certainly the state funding part.
Yes, so with regards towards state funding, absolutely, we are developing a financial model. We do not know as of the moment of this call the dollar amount of state funding that we will be requesting to be able to do and support this amount of growth. And obviously, we need to be very cognizant of what that might be. You know, it is certainly, I think, a good thing that we are providing a very well-priced option to students, but your point is well taken. I cannot speak about collective bargaining matters, so I wonder if President Kalinowski would like to comment about the second part.
I would, but I need to be very careful. We are at the absolute final stages of an agreement between Charter Oak's adjuncts and the institution. And when I say final stages, I have signed a document. I did that a couple of days ago. So that's where we are. We reported on this once to the, I think it was the full board, but at least the board subcommittee on contracts, and they are sort of up to speed on where we're at. So things are in a pretty good place around that issue. I just don't want to get ahead of the signatures. Thank you.
Thank you.
But certainly we will factor in any obvious, you know, considerations and impact of that such agreement into our model.
Regent Santiago?
I know that some of this was in the chat here, but I just wanted to say out loud, great work, Ted. I know you've spent a lot of time kind of working on this and putting it together. You know, President Kalinowski, I know, has been very supportive and excited about the opportunity to grow Charter Oak and capture the benefits that you've outlined there. And I know we have a lot of near peers both in our region and other places that we can look to as the financial model to grow this offering to meet the needs of students, and hopefully build a model that's less reliant on the herky-jerky state funding, but relies on the quality and the excellence of the teaching and the outcomes that we're delivering for students to grow the financial model of the institution. And I know President Kalinowski's done a nice job adding value to students. I look forward to investing and supporting that and that growth. So thank you to your team, and I look forward to seeing this institution grow.
Thanks for those comments. Appreciate it. I think that's it.
Regent Yang, I'd like to thank you for your.
I'm sorry, may I ask one question?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I just wanted to know if you had eyes on the types of programs, online schools that students have been accessing in the other schools, the competitors that you mentioned, and how Charter Oak might be able to fill those gaps, or do we have the offerings that some of the other online schools our Connecticut residents are signing up for out of state? Thank you.
Yeah, we have some of that data. We don't have all of that data, as you might imagine. The data is not they're not volunteering it for us so that we can compete against them, right? But a lot of that data is in iPads, and other systems, and other data sources that which we have been reaching out to. We do not have all of that data, but yes, we are absolutely looking at that. We're the key here, and again, this is not a program review. There's nothing here about program review, but it is certainly, in order we're going to accomplish the goals that we're looking for, we must have the right courses, the right programs that students are looking for. We absolutely are looking to position those programs accordingly. So if anyone has that data, feel free to share it with us. Send it anonymously. No, but seriously, we absolutely want that. We are getting as much as we can. It is absolutely, it is a crowded marketplace. You compete against anyone, who's got a server, right? And we fully do appreciate that, and we want to make sure we are generating value, absolutely, in terms of dollar terms to our students. And that, by the way, also goes into the outcomes of this, right? So just to be clear, our goal is not necessarily granting degrees. It is giving people, because Charter is a completion workforce engine. It is a specific mandate for degree completion, but degree completion, in my opinion, to enable them to enter the workforce and have productive careers. So that is also part of what we're working on. And that analysis, or some conclusions of that analysis, will be in the December 16th report.
Thank you, Regent Yang, and for the there's a lot of excitement around what this report will look like on December 16th. I'm going to ask you for 3 things. Before I do, thank your team, the task force itself, for their hard work and volunteering to lean in and help us in this effort. We appreciate it. The second, I would like you in your final report to look at the MCHEMS report as it relates to online education. I'm going to reread that report. It took about 4.5 hours the first time, but in that report, they speak a lot about their optimism and the opportunity around online education and virtual learning. So I'd point you to that and see where we agree or disagree, or a little bit of both. I'd also like you to come back in that final report and address Professor Sasankar's financial question. I think that's a fair one. And I'm going to add one more. In this moment of virtual learning, I know everyone in your task force knows this, there's a faculty moment around intellectual property and who owns it and how courses are developed. And I'd like to understand that in more detail of what your recommendations are around that. So we're real clear as to what are the best practices, what are the things that we need to be sensitive to as it relates to faculty on this journey.
Okay, will do.
Excellent. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Professor Cunningham before we conclude the meeting. And I know Professor Cunningham had some questions and statements around the ACT framework that could have been addressed earlier, but we may have had a technical glitch or something. Professor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair Gway. I just want to state to begin that I agree with you that we need to have ground truth in these meetings and these discussions. We owe that to each other, we owe that to our students, and we owe that to the state of Connecticut. And so I offer these remarks, first of all, because my understanding of ground truth with respect to the biennial adjustment and the monies involved is exactly the same as Professor Sasanker's. So if we're hearing other things, I'm not sure where the misinformation lies. So I just want to reinforce and agree with everything she said about the financial issues surrounding the biennium. I also want to offer some comments about so-called decorum concerns around remarks offered in this meeting. I hope the board appreciates the long path our faculty have been on, which has involved gaslighting, which has involved outright hostility towards the faculty. And those experiences are still very much in the conscientiousness of our faculty. They will manifest in certain ways in a meeting that might make you uncomfortable. And I would urge you not to center your discomfort over the message that you're getting from people expressing important points on behalf of our students and on behalf of our communities, because when you center your discomfort, that's the easy path. And it allows you to ignore the message. Turning to ACT, I do not have the same view of where ACT is as Chancellor Chang just reported. This is based upon our FAC meeting last Friday. The record will show that ACT, those three pillars, did not involve shared governance. Fair enough, we have to start somewhere. The President's Council is not shared governance, and it established a set of goals that are now arriving predetermined to our true shared governance bodies within CSU, which is our senates. This board needs to be aware that the 4 Senate presidents at CSU are talking about boycotting ACT as a consequence of the lack of shared governance up to this point. The FEC representative from Central in our meeting on Friday said that the president there routed around the Senate and told every department chair to choose one KPI, and that would get rolled up and forwarded to this board. That is not shared governance. The department chairs found this so ludicrous. The FAC representative from Central said many chairs are asking ChatGPT for a KPI, and that's the quality of input you're going to get. Where this is headed is for a conflict with the faculty because you're routing around the shared governance bodies. This is not rocket science. All you need to ask management is, did you get sign off from the 4 senates at CSU? If you didn't, there's a problem with shared governance, and you're going to have continued problems with faculty. I offer this to establish ground truth, not spin, and not overly rosy descriptions of what's actually happening. Because I owe you the truth, I owe it to my students, and I owe it to the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Professor Cunningham, I've been in communication with the Senate presidents and granted them the extension that they wanted to ensure that they got the time in this process. So I've accommodated what's been asked for. You know, if we get share our feelings around discomfort unvarnished, these meetings turn into something else. I can't manage the past. I'm responsible for the past, but I can't manage the past. I can manage how we act today and going forward. You have my commitment that we'll do it well. But I really need people to lean into doing something. I know that the restoration of student services was it's always a bit challenging. We're trying to do something good here. We're getting into a tuffle around that. I can't imagine we have to try to do the hard things. The ACT framework is a positive moment to rally the team around some common goals. So I would address it that way and respond that way, but I appreciate your perspective. on it.
Chairman, may I say something because
Sure,
my name
Zalman.
was used? Can I?
Yes, you got the floor.
Okay. First of all, good morning or good afternoon to everyone. Good morning. I think that the characterization of what I said and the process at Central is a misrepresentation of what is going on at Central. There is a full process that is going on at Central. And allow me a few minutes to explain the involvement of the shared governance. But before that, allow me just to go over, and I have said this before when I reported to this board, where those 9 goals came from. There was work done by the staff at the system office looking at the 6 strategic plans, the plans for each one of the institutions. And they identify common themes directly from those plans, common themes under each one of the goals, on each one of the pillars. And that's where the goals came from. The goals came exactly from the strategic plans that we have at the different institutions. It's only rephrasing and realignment of those goals. Not only that, at Central, we align those 9 goals to specific goals and actions and objective within our plan. And let me then finalize, finish my comments with the process we are following. The process that we are following at Central, yes, the ask is for them to develop a key performance indicator per goal. But we have also asked for feedback about the goals. And there are 2 different avenues being used to develop key performance indicators. The University Planning and Budget Committee, which is a Senate committee, was asked to develop a key performance indicator per goal, send that to the Senate. At the same time, the deans are working with the department chairs and the provost to develop another set of key performance indicators, 1 per goal, and that input will go to the Senate as well. Finally, the Senate will consider 2 sets of key performance indicators, deliberate on those, and submit to the Integrated Planning Council, which is the final decision maker at Central, the recommendations. And once the Integrated Planning Council review and approve the key performance indicators, they will be sent to the system office. Yes, we were asked to submit per institution a key performance indicator per goal. And finally, let me say that, as the chairman said, we need to start somewhere. And we are not reinventing the wheel in this process. We are capitalizing on the work that is underway at the institution that is associated with the strategic plans. The way the goals were developed was with the objective of capitalizing on that work, but at the same time, given that we had a very short timeline to deliver, to take additional burden of the faculty. That was the intention, because at least at Central, our strategic planning process took 18 months, was very much based on shared governance, and constituents, internal and external, had the opportunity to provide feedback and work on that. So I thought it was needed, the clarification. And I am, as always, willing to work within the shared governance structure. And I guarantee you that I work with the faculty at Central, and I didn't appreciate the characterization of what I have done at Central.
Thank you.
May I respond to that, Chair Gway?
Sure.
Okay. I am glad we heard from President Toro and her perspective on how things are shaping up at Central. I think that's completely appropriate. I will say that I am channeling the remarks of Professor Mark Jackson from Friday, made on the record, who is Central's FAC representative, elected FAC representative. And President Toro did not correct that public record until this very moment. And his comments were on the public record last Friday. So if there's any question of mischaracterization, everyone here can go to YouTube and watch what Mark Jackson said about the process there. And if there are inaccuracies in what he said, I would ask that those be written and submitted to the FAC so we can discuss those at our next meeting. Because it is Mark Jackson's responsibility as an elected representative to share with the FAC and therefore this board what is happening on their campus. The second thing is strategic plans are not shared governance. 3 of the strategic plans that are being touted right today were created under presidents that have been fired, that have left, and who have retired. Those are not current strategic plans going out to 2030. Those are dated strategic plans from people who are not even in our communities anymore. That's not acceptable. That's not shared governance. As I said before, shared governance is, did you get the sign off from 4 senates?
Can you send me the strategic plans that you have that have been developed with shared governance, Professor Cunningham?
Well, since we have an interim president at Southern, we have an interim president at Western, and we have a brand new president at Eastern. We don't have
the last one. Just no matter how old they are, just forward them to me.
You should maybe kick that to the President's Council because they're alleging that that's what they used.
Well, I want to take it to the FAC. I want you to send me what your perspective is on the strategic plans. And
okay,
well,
if the president,
I'll listen to your meeting last Friday also and follow up.
Thank you, Chair Gway. And if the President's Council wants to send to us these alleged strategic plans, I mean, I don't even know what CT State's strategic plan is. Has that been passed by the Senate there? If they want to send these alleged documents that were used to formulate these goals, I will be happy to circulate those to the FAC and get feedback on them.
Okay. Thank you. Regent Santiago?
I don't really want to get in the middle of this brouhaha, Chairman Gway, but I did want to just say, I thought at your introduction at the meeting, I believe it was at Central, you tried to set a new tone for how these meetings go and for the inner working between the interested parties. I thought that the way you set that tone was appropriate and demonstrated strong command. I think you've tried to live up to that both in these meetings and offline, even as you just demonstrated. And so my commentary earlier was to live up to the commitments we've made to each other to make our comments on policy and on execution and not personal attacks. And I think you'll go back and listen to it, and anyone that can listen to it can see that the comments at the beginning of this meeting did not meet that standard. And the board has for too long sat quiet in the face of that type of behavior. And I will not be doing that any longer. So we set the new tone. We got to live up to that tone on all sides, and we got to call it out when it's not there.
Thank you. Interim President Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond to, I guess, the alleged strategic plans. I arrived at Southern June of 2023, and the institution was in the development 18 months into the development of the current strategic plan. And when I arrived, there was all stakeholders that was involved in the development of the strategic plan. We basically launched the strategic plan in the fall of 2023. And I assure you that there was input from all stakeholders, and this plan was started well before I arrived here. We just launched it that fall of 2023.
Thank you. Professor Cunningham, did you want to follow up?
I mean, I just would say I appreciate the clarification on the timing of that strategic plan. When we have so much leadership in flux, you know, my personal opinion is that when we finally recruit permanent people into these positions, they should be given the opportunity to develop their strategic plans. I don't even know what we're telling them as we recruit them, that you have to follow the last president's, you know, plan developed under their leadership. I mean, I don't know if that's fair to them. But in any event, I appreciate clarification on the timing of these things, but you know, no one can debate that we have leadership in flux at 3 of our 4 campuses.
Fair point. President Singh?
Thank to chime in with respect to our strategic plan, Western Rising, that we just launched on September 25th this year. I joined Western as interim last year, August 25th, and we immediately started conversations in the shared governance philosophy and framework that we have developed. And this plan really reflects the will of the stakeholders at Western. And I would certainly want to say that despite the fact that we are in search of next president, the plan does not belong to a president. It is reflective of the will of the stakeholders, faculty, staff, students. And biggest point here is that the Senate president at Western was part of the steering committee. Union leaders were part of some of the subcommittees. So it is well grounded in the aspirations of an institution. The next president, the permanent president, whosoever that person would be, will take that and of course has the right to tweak based upon his or her vision. But I do believe the process at Western was followed to the very ground in terms of shared governance principles. And I think on my campus, this understanding is wide and deep, that this plan belongs to the campus, not to the president, and the next president will follow this in the same philosophy and fashion that we crafted this plan. I will be very happy to send a copy to the Chancellor's office, which will then be forwarded to the board. So thank you for this opportunity for sure.
Thank you. I do think there's a lot of people doing a lot of good things and doing them well. We have a real desire to do things a lot better, more collaboratively with decorum and transparency. Those are the values that I communicated early. If Secretary Chair can send me the link to the meeting, I'll get caught up in the first 11 minutes and I'll be well suited to follow up next time. I would like to conclude today by letting everyone know that we have our special BOR board meeting at Central Connecticut State University on December 5th, where OPM-sponsored NCHEM's plan will be presented. I look forward to seeing everyone there. But on behalf of this board of regents, I'd like to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully we do have a lot to be grateful for. And I hope everyone gets the much needed rest and recuperation. We'll see you on the backside of the holidays. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
So there's a chorus of seconds, right? So I'll acknowledge that. I'll acknowledge that. My strategic plan is to end the meeting right now. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries and the live streaming will be stopped. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.